Welcome back to the County Agent Podcast. This week, we have Dr. AJ Tarpoff from Kansas State University with us, and we're going to have a little discussion and hopefully shed some light on the situation with the new World Screwworm, which we have now seen in the United States. AJ, how are you doing?
Doing well. It's good to be on, to be able to share a little info on the current scenario, and I'm sure it'll be ongoing and changing in the weeks to come. But it's good to shed some light on what this is, what to expect, and kind of understand a little bit at a deeper level of what the New World Screwworm is, and we can get rid of a lot of the misinformation going around social media.
And I think, is it okay if we start with, this isn't the first time we've seen this. You know, we believe we had it eradicated back in the 60s, but there was a case or some cases in the state of Florida that affected some deer and things back in 2016 or 17, but they got that eradicated rather quickly too, I think within a year. And so it's nothing new, nothing to run scared of, but have you heard any other cases other than that that's been out and about?
So there has been quite a few reported cases. This isn't anything new. Just as you said, historically, New World Screwworm, as its name, it's kind of its lay name refers to. This was naturally found through North and South America. It's still endemic and still very common in South America. So yes, we made a push as a North American continent to be able to push it from our borders. And that was a cooperative effort back in the 50s and 60s to eradicate it completely from the U.S. and Mexico and push it down into the Darien Gap in Panama. And that's kind of where it's been stalled out, and that's where we've held it just through some of the geographic borders and boundaries. So yes, it's been found. You mentioned the Florida scenario. Just a few years ago, everybody seems to forget this, but we had an outbreak of New World Screwworm in the Keys, the Florida Keys, the chain of islands off of southern Florida, that we actually had a pretty big outbreak impacting the endangered key deer. So there's a very small endangered white-tailed deer that inhabits some of those islands in Florida. And of course, it was during the rut. So if anybody knows anything about white-tailed deer during the rut, the bucks are fighting and rubbing on stuff, and they may have some lesions or marks from fighting. Well, that New World Screwworm, unfortunately, really infested a lot of the male deer on those islands, infested them. It burrows, and we talk more about the biology a little bit later, but it was devastating to those deer. They found it. They were able to release a bunch of the sterile flies to be able to control it. They set up big quarantine zones. They checked all the animals and people going in and out. And believe it or not, there were quite a few dogs that were visiting that went down with their owners, went back. There were cases all the way up into Georgia and things like that of individual animals like dogs and pets, and even a pot-bellied pig, if I remember that correctly, that had a lesion from New World Screwworm. They were able to track all those movements. They were able to keep on top of that. But even the last several months, within the last year, we've had some human cases of New World Screwworm of people that were visiting South America, came back, had a weird lesion that just wasn't healing. It was painful. They went into the doctor and they found the maggots inside some of those lesions. So those things periodically happen. They get reported. The CDC, USDA, everybody's on the same page to be able to track and monitor those scenarios. So no, this is nothing new. This is things that we've been continually battling for the last 70 years almost. Now, what's changed is here recently, over the last 2 years or so, there has been kind of a breach in that control area down in Panama. And it has slowly crept its way through from southern Mexico up to the southern border of Texas. So that's what's new. That's what's been changing. Now, it doesn't mean that the United States, we've just been sitting here idle. There has been an enormous amount of preparation. There's been an enormous amount of planning and follow through that in case they very much anticipated it was going to cross the border at some point. It actually took a longer than what they originally anticipated, but that also goes into some of our cooperative agreements and some of the pieces they've been able to put in place in Mexico to stall out the spread. So this isn't unexpected. We kind of knew this was coming, but the plans and the execution of those plans and the preparations, I believe it or not, I feel pretty good about our response plan going forward to help control this fly.
Yeah, I was reading. Yeah, this is something we've been preparing for a couple of years, probably since around 2023, somewhere in there. And the most effective treatment that they've had, I believe, is the release of sterile flies, which means they're not going to reproduce. And that's how we got rid of them the first time. And if I've understood right, they've been releasing them for quite a while down in South America, all the way up into Mexico. And we could probably reasonably assume that that's why it's taken so long for us to even see a case in the United States, is our government was so proactive with collaborating with some countries in South America to say, hey, let's, if we can't stop it, let's slow it down as much as we can. And I see they're building, we've got some facilities in Texas that's been producing the sterile flies, and they've just put some money into another facility. And so they're being very proactive.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that. So basic biology of even though we call it the New World Screwworm, it's a fly. It's a fly that lays eggs, and it's the maggot that actually causes issue. And that maggot burrows in and eats in live flesh. That's what makes it very different than other maggots, other flies, and that's what makes it so painful and kind of devastating to those individual animals from a welfare perspective. Now, the New World Screwworm, with its life cycle, there are male and female flies. Now, what they sterilize and kind of the life cycle, how it should, they actually have a mating. The female lays eggs near an open wound. The maggots go in, feed for about a week. Those big maggots fall off, burrow into the soil, and then they re-emerge after about a week or so, and then it's kind of the next generation. But they've used the biology and the life cycle against this fly, and that's how they've been able to control and eradicate it. Female New World Screwworm flies only mate one time in their lifetime. So if it is an infertile mating, if there is something where the male that comes and breeds with that female and it doesn't yield offspring, we can immediately kind of interact, just biologically and destroy that population. So that's why they sterilize the male flies. That way, whenever they seek out and find some of those females, it's an infertile mating, and that's the only time that fly will ever mate. You mentioned about the fly production. So for years, how we've been able to manage and control this fly down in the Darien Gap in Panama is through those multi-country, collaborative efforts. There is currently only one manufacturing location of the sterilized flies, and it's in Panama. Now the USDA and the U.S. government also invested to be able to retrofit a fly production facility in Mexico that will essentially double the world capability of production of sterile flies by about 1 million flies extra per week, which will be excellent. And then the third investment, so that Mexico production plant should be up and operational this summer, which will be fantastic and really help with a lot of these ongoing efforts. And then the third location that eventually will have production capabilities will be a Moore Air Base in Texas. So that's the recent advancement. The investment has already happened. Construction is ongoing, but that will be done. From the last I've seen, it'll be kind of later into 2027. But then we will have U.S.-based production and capabilities for dispersal. So we do disperse flies with this outbreak. They are dispersing those sterile flies on U.S. soil from Moore Air Base in Texas. So we have the infrastructure. The infrastructure is being built. The infrastructure is working. But there's more to come on overall efficacy and overall production. So it's exciting to see that because without the sterile fly production, it would be very difficult to completely eradicate an environmental pest like this.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember that this is spread by the fly. If you have an infected animal, it's not going to, like say, if there's a cow that gets New World Screwworm, it's not going to infect the entire herd. The fly is the key component.
And this is not a food safety issue. This is not an infection of a they don't carry different bacteria or other diseases. This is purely the pest and an infestation. And in order for that infestation to occur, I mean, these flies can live in the environment, but unless an animal has a wound and the ability for those larvae, to burrow into an open wound and consume live flesh, we're talking about dehorning, castration, wounds, umbilical wounds from soon after birth. There has to be some type of inviting location for these flies to take a hold. So it's not entire herds. Just like you said, it's individuals within an area where the flies are active that have already some type of opening or wound for them to take a hold.
Yeah, and we could probably safely say that if you're following good BQA standards or practices, even with the dehorning, castration, all of that, you're probably lessening the chances of having it just through good quality practices. I guess one thing I'd like to bring up also is, I mean, now would probably be a good time if you want to reduce the chances of having a wound on an animal. And I think we need to clarify that, I'm in cattle country, but this affects all livestock, deer, some pets. I mean,
any warm-blooded animal, it's wildlife, it's pets, it's people, it's livestock. So we always think about cattle when we think about New World Screwworm, but it's ubiquitous. It's not specific to cattle, and I think that's good to understand.
Yeah, but it'd be a good time, if you have the time. Make sure your facilities are good. Make sure your trailers are good. Make sure there's nothing that when you transport livestock or handle livestock that's going to increase the chances of somehow creating an open wound on that animal, because that's the key. They have to have something to hatch those eggs into or lay those eggs into, and that's generally an open wound. And if we take care of our facilities, handle our livestock appropriately, we lessen those chances. And I wanted to pick your brain because me and Cassandra had a talk recently about Theileria, and she stressed, and I was tickled that she did that. Don't go out and treat everything on the place right now, because there's a really good chance you'll create a bigger problem by building resistance than treating it.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I know there's concern around the country of wanting to protect your livestock and doing those things and going above and beyond. But now is not the time to be brash and to start making any of those big changes. Remember, I mentioned this is an infestation that slowly moves into different locations. So you talked about products and going and treating everybody. We do have some conditionally approved products that are available for livestock producers. The FDA has been working over the last year and a half to get approvals for both systemic products that you can give to animals to be able to kill those larvae. There are some pesticides to be able to use in certain circumstances. Those products and those lists are available on screwworm.org, the government website, or screwworm.gov is kind of the catch-all website that the USDA has put together to be able to harbor that information. So working with your local veterinarian, if you have concerns, if you have individual animals, if you have these strange wounds that have a bad smell, that have maggots, I guess that you don't need to run out and go treat all of your animals. I don't think that that's appropriate today. But what we do is stay vigilant. Make sure that you are observing your animals. If you see anything abnormal, step one, call your local veterinarian. Let them, assess, have a look at that animal. If they see something that looks suspicious, then they can take it up the chain to be able to make sure we stay on top of it as quickly as possible. So these screwworm cases, for example, the operation that had the positive calf, the 3-week-old calf in Texas, that herd is not being condemned or anything like that. All they're doing is going through assessing those animals, they're treating those animals, and then they're going back to regular life, regular production. They just put that operation in a quarantine bubble around it just to be able to find that group. So it doesn't end the life of these animals, it doesn't condemn them, none of those things. It's just identifying, treating the animals that have been impacted by this fly, and then setting up proper control measures to be able to control the spread of the fly, because it's not an infection, it's an infestation. And we have cool products, better products than what we had in the past. We have better pesticides and systemic products that they did not have access to in the 50s and 60s when they eradicated this fly. So we're in a much better position today than what we were in the past, and I feel very confident we're going to stay on top of this pest in the months to come.
I was thinking back. This is just me speaking. I think we delayed the migration of this fly by about a year, because it seemed like it was a year ago they thought it would hit Texas in July.
Yep.
And here we are, June 2026, and it's just now got there in a single case. I think we need to keep that in mind right now. That's just a single case, and so you're exactly right. Modern science and technology has advanced quite a bit since we've seen it the last time. And let's call a spade a spade. We're sitting in Kansas. Of course, I'm a little closer to the Oklahoma border than you are, so I'm a little closer to Texas. But it's got a long ways to go before it gets to Kansas, and then it's going to have to try to survive a Kansas winter, even in southern Kansas, which is not likely.
And historically, it does not survive the winter. This is a tropical fly that needs very unique environmental conditions. The pupa, even though they burrow into the soil, they don't survive cold temperatures. So even historically, when we had screwworm, that we would have cases, back, decades and decades ago in Kansas, they didn't survive. It was a seasonality of either they brought animals up from Texas that were harboring and had some of those pupae or those maggots associated with them, and then they brought them into a herd. There'd be a few localized infections, and then winter would come in, kill off all the flies, and no more problem. So there is a yearly variation, a seasonality to this, that as a Kansas producer, it's very low risk for this. Is not something that's going to set up shop and be in Kansas indefinitely and interact with animals year round. That's just not how this works biologically. Now, we need to be realistic. We bring in animals from all over the country into Kansas. We're a net importer. But interstate commerce, the whole purpose of the response plan that USDA put together for the New World Screwworm is to maintain interstate commerce and maintain continuity of business. We don't want to interfere with regular business operations, the cattle industry. And with what's been set up, there is very little risk of really messing with cattle markets, really messing with regular, just regular day-to-day on a ranch or a feedlot or a backgrounder or a stalker. That's the whole purpose of this. It's very specific to location. It shouldn't mess with interstate commerce, and that's kind of the goal. And a lot of the states have already been discussing this for the last couple of years to make sure that they weren't just going to close their borders to any and all imports or exports, that they're using the science, they're using the quarantine zones, managing those as they should be, and essentially keeping business operations open and rolling normal. And I'm very happy, believe it or not, with the government response, the communication between states, all of these things that since 2023 we've been in discussions about. This is a good thing, and it's playing out in real time right now. And I'm actually proud that it didn't go to that extreme when it really didn't need to.
Yeah, and I think now would be appropriate that we stress this in extension, and some people listen, some people don't. if you do have concerns, now would be a great time to develop a relationship with your local veterinarian and utilize that local veterinarian. And if you suspect a case, by all means, we will put all the contact information in the podcast notes. But we got a great resource with the Kansas Department of Agriculture with Justin Smith and his team. We can put the contact information for APHIS, which is leading the charge on this. But I think it would be important that if you have an infected animal, you're probably going to know that. I'm assuming it's going to respond just like any other animal that's got some discomfort, that it may not be with the rest of the herd. It may isolate itself. And also, though, but keep an eye on that. If you've got something with an open wound, let's be proactive about treating that sooner rather than later. And I know this is a busy time of year where I'm at, because we got a lot of people that are harvesting wheat right now and canola, trying to put up hay and different stuff, and still running cattle, but still put eyes on those cows, those calves, and make sure you're being proactive about those visual inspections.
Yep. Well, visual and using more than one sense. So I'll be honest, personally, I have never seen a New World Screwworm case. I've talked and worked with veterinarians that have worked in different areas of South America, down into southern Mexico, or they were in practice for, they're much older than I am, but they were in practice and actually saw it either in practice or as a young kid growing up, that they remember and they have seen some of those cases. Use your nose. That's one thing that that every person that I have interacted with that has seen New World Screwworm cases is it's very indicative that you can smell those kind of putrid, it's almost like a rotting flesh smell from those lesions, because that New World Screwworm burrows into live tissue, it destroys and makes a bigger necrotic mess. So because of that invasive nature, it's very smelly, very putrid smelling. So if you have some of those cases, don't make sure that you roll the window down in your side-by-side. If you've got AC in there, roll that window down to make sure you can use your nose as well to be able to pick up some of that, hey, that putrid odor, that's abnormal. That's something that we need to keep an eye out for as well.
And I want to take it just a different direction just for a second and remind everybody that if you're a sheep producer or a goat producer, you're not immune to this as well, but just continue your good practices. If you're docking tails on a sheep or dehorning a goat or castrating or having baby sheep and goats right now, there's some very simple stuff that a lot of people already implement that would lessen these chances. I mean, I know a lot of people with sheep and goats that'll dip umbilical cords with iodine after birth. When they dehorn, they treat that area after the dehorning process on a goat. And so you're not immune to it. This isn't just exclusive to cattle, as we've tried to reiterate, but continue your good practices. If you're not doing that, I'd encourage you to start doing that, because that would lessen any chance. If you're going to increase the chances of flies if you're not doing that, regardless of if you've got the New World Screwworm fly.
And there's products that exist today that we use regularly in open wound spaces to keep flies out of them anyway. There are other flies that we have naturally in Kansas that will lay eggs and maggots that'll get into nasty wounds. Those feed on the dead and decaying tissue, and it's just good practice in general to have good fly control, making sure that we're cleaning up some of those locations when we have compromised tissue like castration, dehorning, disc budding, tail docking, any of those scenarios, making sure that we have good fly control for those animals. I mean, for example, I need to go castrate my niece's bottle calf, getting ready for the fair. I need to go do that. I have some fly control planned for post-castration to make sure that we're staying on top of that.
You bet. Is there anything else we need to cover that would help producers, or anything we haven't covered so far?
I think it's there is a huge response in place, and I think it's good to feel comfortable with that response because I am very impressed with what they have put together. Number two, work with your local veterinarian, stay observant with your animals. If you see things abnormal, talk to your veterinarian. Okay, there's nothing that there's no product used. There's nothing to go out and outrightly treat your entire herd or anything like that, because that doesn't help us any in this given scenario. There is a seasonality, so that helps us here within the state of Kansas. Markets and things like that. This is not a food safety concern. This is not a huge disruption for the entire, U.S. cattle herd. That's just not how this fly works. And honestly, we've got things that are coming that are really going to put a stall and really start pushing back and getting this back to kind of, past the Darien Gap, get it pushed back and let it stay in some of those areas. And keep in mind, there are huge cattle industries in South America that have been operating very effectively, very efficiently with New World Screwworm. Okay, so yes, it can be devastating, but it's not the huge losses. It's not the huge things like that. It is a huge nuisance, and that's why it does cost a lot of labor. It's a welfare concern of some of those cases that do come down with it. It's very different than some of our other foreign animal diseases. This is a foreign animal pest, not necessarily a foreign animal disease. So it's kind of a differentiation there.
You bet. You bet. Well, AJ, I thank you for taking time this morning on a moment's notice to jump on here and do this recording. And we will, whether you're watching this on YouTube, Spotify, or listening on Apple, we're going to put some information in the podcast notes. I will say K-State Extension does have a nice fact sheet on the New World Screwworm. Talks about the life cycle, the migration, signs, symptoms, all of that. We'll make that available as well. Once again, just thank you for taking time so we can kind of put some stuff at ease.
Yeah, no, always a pleasure to be on, and hopefully this helps clarify some things and give some more information that producers can use going forward.
You bet. Well, have a good rest of your day, AJ.
All right, thank you.